Welcome to the revision video for Macbeth and our AO2 quotes. So this video is aimed at students who are looking for a grade 7 or above. So we're going to go into a lot of detail with each quote. That means the video is going to be quite long, so you might want to just skip to the quotes that you're currently revising. The other thing that's really important is that if you're going to be revising AO2 quotes, one of the best ways to do it is to write out the quote on a blank piece of paper. And then in one colour, write down everything that you can remember relating to that quote. Who said it, why they said it, what the main techniques are in that quote, what the big ideas are, any context that relates to it, anything at all that you can think of. Then check against these slides or the revision guides that you've got, and I want you to then add anything that you've missed. Once you've done that, you can obviously see which bits you've remembered, and you can see which bits you haven't. What you'll then want to do is put that to one side and come to it another day. When you come to it the next time, what we're hoping will happen is you will remember even more of your own notes, and eventually you won't need the revision video and you won't need revision guides. That's probably the best way to remember all the things that you need to about AO2 quotes. So without further ado, let's get into it. Our first quote is "Fair is foul and foul is fair." This comes from the opening scene of the play, and it really establishes what the witches are about and the themes that surround them. The first thing that we're going to say about this quote is that it uses paradoxical language. That's our big headline technique. Now, something that's paradoxical is contradictory. It contradicts itself. It seems impossible, but it's also got some truth to it. And that's really important because Shakespeare is establishing a key idea for the play in this first scene. The idea of appearance versus reality, what things appear to be and what things really are. And also one of the big threads through the play, which is deception and lies. They're telling us that this play is going to be filled with moral uncertainty. Things aren't going to be as straightforward as they seem. There's going to be duplicity, deceitful acts, murder. So they're telling us straight from the beginning that things aren't going to be what they seem. Now, fair is foul. Fair means good. So fair is foul means good is bad, really. The boundaries between what is good and what is evil are going to be confusing, difficult to see and blurred. Fair is an adjective, which means, as I said, good. And that means that things which sometimes appear to be good turn out actually to not be good. So Macbeth is a great example of this. In scene 2, he's presented as a hyperbolic, almost mythic hero. He fights in honour of the king. And that seems to be a good thing. But when we meet him later on, he speaks the words of the witches. He says, "So foul and fair a day I have not seen." And so we should be questioning immediately, is this the man we thought he was? We know that obviously in reality he's an overly ambitious tyrant, and so a man that seems to be good is in actual fact foul, which obviously means bad. And this also reflects that good and evil are interchangeable. They're going to be difficult to see in the play. Things which are evil or good might be the other way around. And so this play is about human beings, about mankind, and about how we can't always trust their appearances, and the duplicitous, the two-sided nature of mankind. The word foul is more dominant. Fair, foul. Just the intonation of foul makes it a more dominant word. And this suggests that foulness is going to be, evil is going to be a more predominant theme in the play. Foulness also pollutes and corrupts. If something is fair and foulness gets involved, it becomes corrupted. It rarely works the other way around. And so evil overpowers goodness and virtue in this play. And then the verb is. This is an absolute word. It is. It's almost like a statement of fact. It is a truth. The witches then have control over fate. They can tell us fair is categorically foul. And Macbeth's fate and the fate of Scotland's wrapped up in that. This quote is spoken chorally. So in chorus, all three witches speak at once. Now this emphasizes their unity, but it also emphasizes that they have no individual identity. They're one character in three parts. Now, the choral sound makes this sound a bit like a magical spell. And King James, who wrote Demonology, stated that all magic was evil. And by speaking it like this, it sounds like a magic spell, it sounds evil. So Shakespeare's playing on the fears of the audience. It also shows that the witches see things differently than the standard understanding of the world. And that reinforces King James's beliefs about witchcraft. It also makes the witches stand out as other. They are different from every other character in the play. They also use anastrophe, where we change the order of a sentence. So fair is foul, foul is fair, it's reversed. This perhaps tells us that the witches can subvert and change things. They have the power of manipulation. The language is also spoken in trochaic tetrameter. Now, this means that it's got an almost eeny, meeny, miny, mo sort of feel to it. It makes the witches seem otherworldly because no other characters in the play speak like this. So it emphasizes their otherness, but also their delight in bad things, like almost a childlike appreciation for causing chaos and their hatred for things that are good. This links potentially to the idea of them being three of them as well, because we see the pattern of three as a language technique used throughout the play, but whenever we see things come in a pattern of three, it is usually referring to something evil, otherworldly, something that is considered unnatural, and it reminds us whenever we see a pattern of three in the play that the witch's influence might be involved here. They talk about hover through the filthy air, and so hover through the fog and filthy air. So hovering suggests that they are going to be ever present in this play, and this reminder using the pattern of three might be a reminder that they're hovering in the background. This also, as I've said before, foreshadows Macbeth's first line. He linguistically mirrors the witches. He speaks words very similar to them in a similar pattern to them. And so he's linked to witches and therefore evil right at the start. And this suggests the harmful effects that they're going to have on him, but also that this is a character we shouldn't necessarily trust. Our next quote is a combination of three different quotes from throughout the play. Now we're going to call this Macbeth's zoomorphic journey. So our big technique here is zoomorphism. Now this is a great quote to use if you're looking at Macbeth as a character, or if you're looking at masculinity, because obviously this tracks his masculinity in a number of ways. It's also a good one if you're looking at deception, because again, he seems to be one thing, but perhaps it's something else. So the quote's quite versatile. The first part of this quote is eagle's lion. Now, this is zoomorphic, obviously, so he's been made to be like an eagle or a lion. Immediately when you zoomorphize a character, you want to question, is their humanity being taken away from them? Is he in some way inhumane? And I think that's definitely relevant here, even though the captain who's reporting this perhaps doesn't mean it this way. He means to glorify Macbeth. As reported language, this suggests a sense of heroic reputation. But he's earned this reputation through violence. That's incredibly important right at the start of the play. Again, Shakespeare is telling us that violence is going to be a central part of this play. Now, lions and eagles are both opportunistic hunters. Many predators are. And this reminds us that Macbeth, as an opportunistic hunter himself, was going to seize an opportunity to murder Duncan and to advance his position. The other thing is that as part of the potential dehumanizing of Macbeth, they're lower in the great chain than human beings. So on one hand, he's been glorified, but subtly there's a message there that he's perhaps not entirely a good man. This also potentially foreshadows the descent into animalistic behavior that he embodies later in the play. It foreshadows his lack of or his loss of humanity. Now, lions are predatory, they're dominant, and they're ruled by instinct rather than reason. And you could argue that by the end of the play, Macbeth has been all of these things: a predator, attempting to be dominant, trying to assert his dominance through violence and fear, and ruled by instincts and fears rather than rational thought. The quote obviously might tell us that right from the very start of this play, he doesn't have as much humanity as other characters. So let's focus on the lion first. I think that's probably the most important part of this. This is about Macbeth and Banquo. They're fighting at the beginning of the play. So Macbeth's a lion. They're known for superiority, they're known for power, they're often characterized as being symbols of bravery. So immediately we think that about him. He's superior, he's powerful, and possibly he's very brave. They're also called the King of the Jungle. Now, this possibly foreshadows that he will be rising up the food chain like a lion and become king. Now, lions obviously don't actually live in jungles, but jungle is a word derived from Hindi, which refers to savanna and steppe, which is where lions do actually live. So don't worry too much about King of the Jungle. The fact that people refer to them that way is enough. The quote highlights his bravery. He's known for fighting to the bitter end. We see that when he kills MacDonald. We see it at the end as well. But bravery doesn't have morality. So we can say that somebody is brave, but we're not really making a comment on whether they're good or bad. It seems like we are, but in actual fact, bravery has no morality. You can be brave even whilst doing something wrong. Something else about lions is that male lions rely on their females to hunt. And this could suggest a little of Macbeth's relationship with Lady Macbeth. She has to push him immediately. She's very proactive in the relationship. Macbeth relies on her quite a lot. And so the lion zoomorphism could suggest that. It's interesting that we have eagles and lion, a singular and a plural. It suggests that eagles includes Banquo, and eagles in this quote are a little more noble perhaps. And lion is singular, so it potentially means just Macbeth. It singles them out as different, and it singles perhaps Macbeth out as possibly more savage. Lions and eagles are predators. They have to use violence to survive. So by comparing Macbeth to a lion, we're emphasizing the respect that's given to violent men during this time. Now, Shakespeare's probably subtly suggesting to us that we should be really careful who we place our trust in and who we respect. Because if we place our trust in violent men like Macbeth, we shouldn't be surprised if they use violence to gain power or in their other interactions. There's a comment here about masculinity. The idea that men in Jacobean times and in the modern era are often only allowed to show their feelings through anger and violence limits them and can be a problem. Remember that Shakespeare gives the male characters that we're supposed to like more feminine qualities. There's an interesting idea about an eagle and a lion that when they're put together, they become a griffin, a mythical creature, a mythological creature. Now, griffins have been symbols of nobility and royalty for many, many years. And so eagle and lion suggests he's got the potential for nobility, the potential for royalty. It also suggests that Macbeth is almost mythic in scale. His heroism is mythic. Somebody almost like Heracles. A griffin is mythic, so is Heracles. Myth means story, and myths often include superhuman characters, but myths are also ultimately untrue. Also, in myths, the heroes are flawed. Heracles actually kills his whole family, and that's what starts him on his journey. If we're using a mythological creature to compare to Macbeth, we need to question two things. Is he really a hero, and does this version of Macbeth really exist? The journey continues when Lady Macbeth says that her husband is like the cat in the adage. So we're still going to call this zoomorphic. It's a zoomorphic simile. So as we're describing this quote, we want to make sure we keep using techniques as we go through. Now at this point, she's alluding to an adage. An adage is a simple story with a message. Now this particular adage would be well known to the audience. It's the story about a cat who's by a stream. He wants to catch a fish in that stream, but he's too scared to get his paws wet. So she's portraying him here by using this story as a coward. She's trying to undermine his masculinity and his bravery. She is emasculating him. Now we know that this is a strategy that she uses several times in an attempt to manipulate him. Shakespeare is probably commenting here that restrictive gender roles and expectations, particularly for men here, can be a problem for society, because if you identify by a particular gender role and you can be emasculated to make you do things, then you're easily deceived and manipulated. This also highlights that their relationship is transgressive. She attacks his integrity, which is ironic considering that calling him a coward when they're about to kill the king. And it reinforces that this relationship is not what a Jacobean would expect. He's also been downgraded from a wild lion to a more domesticated cat. The other thing is that it makes regicide seem simple. Lady Macbeth is trying to say, it's easy. Just grab the fish out of the stream. It's as easy as that. Why are you scared to get your paws wet? And this might link to the motif of water that appears later in the play as well. Finally, in Act 5, we see they have tied me to a stake, but bear-like I must fight. Again, we're going to reference the zoomorphic nature of this. He sees himself as brave in this quote, as he was once seen at the start of the play, because he's prepared to fight even though he's going to die. Again, bravery has no morality, so even though he's been a tyrant at this point, he sees himself as brave for still fighting. Now, this is a simile, so bear-like is a simile. Macbeth acknowledges he cannot escape, but even so he must fight. Now, he's a wild animal at this point. Bears are wild animals, and so he's wild. He's been captured, though. He's been tied to a stake, which is an allusion to bear baiting. It was a very common event where a bear was chained to a stake and over several hours was prodded and poked until it was killed. Macbeth knows that he's going to die. You cannot escape a stake. He knows he's going to lose, but despite that, he keeps fighting. Fighting is the only thing he knows, which does suggest that the glory given to him at the start was misplaced. We've got the pronoun they. Macbeth is blaming other people for his fate, a mysterious they, whoever they might be. This reminds us that this man has diminished responsibility. When he killed Duncan, he blames Glamis, he blames Cawdor, he blames Macbeth in the third person because he doesn't want to accept responsibility for himself doing it. Again here he wants to deflect and blame somebody else. They have tied me to a stake. He almost cannot accept that it is his actions that have led him here. Stake is also fairly symbolic. Witches are tied to stakes to be burned, so it might remind us of the witch's hand in his fate. And the verb fight, again, reinforces the violence that is integral, an essential part of who he is. Focusing now on the bear symbol itself. So bears are predators. They're just like lions. So we really have to question, if he was a lion at the start and a bear now, has he ever really changed? Was his evil just hidden better at the start? At the start, he was motivated by seemingly patriotism, but now he's motivated by his own self-interest. Bears are lonely creatures. They live solitary lives. And so this mirrors his isolation. He has no longer has his thanes. His wife has died. So he's got nobody around him. And that's really reinforced with the pronoun I. We might suggest royalty, so we would use the royal we, or at least he's got friends or allies around him. But the I reveals that he's lost this. He's lost his royalty. He's lost his people. As a contextual point relating to bear baiting, Shakespeare may have been competing with bear baiting at this point. Everybody in a Jacobean audience, just like today, likes a bit of blood and violence, and so he gives his audience blood here. If bear baiting is happening and there's the latest Shakespeare play on, where are you going to spend your pennies? So Shakespeare gives the audience blood. He knows that the audience enjoys a spectacle, and so he gives them one. Piece the charms up is something that the witches say just before they meet Macbeth, and this is a great quote if you want to talk about the witches, the supernatural, if you want to talk about fate or destiny or free will, and it's also a nice one if you're talking about Macbeth as well. So first and foremost, peace is an imperative verb. They give a command. and it reminds us of the witch's capabilities of command and control of others. It's paradoxical and ironic because peace is not what these sisters stand for. They're agents of chaos. They like to sow disorder, and so peace is the antithesis of what they stand for. This just reinforces their ambiguous nature, their deceitful nature. On the other hand, this could potentially be their peace, because peace for them is things going according to plan. They say thrice to thine and thrice to mine. So prior to saying this, they kind of consolidate their power with patterns of threes. And that links quite nicely to the idea of patterns of threes used throughout the play. Whenever Shakespeare uses a pattern of three, it's a reminder of the witch's influence, a reminder of their evil force. Charm is a noun, and it's an object that is, again, ironic because charms are often used by Jacobeans to ward off evil. So the witches speak those words is ironic. To be charmed is to be fascinated or even attracted to somebody, and charming then feels false, not genuine. It feels like this is a fake in some way. Charm is also a word for kind of magic, and it highlights that they are supernatural. If you charm somebody, there's a connotation that you have captured their attention, that they are now under your thrall. Has Macbeth possibly been charmed by their powers, or is he about to be charmed by their powers? He is wrapped, remember. Later evidence will show us that he's already a dangerous and ambitious man. So possibly he's not charmed, but because of this ambition, he's easily tempted by their power, by their offers of power and promise for the future. Remember that they don't actually give him power. They offer the idea of power. They prophesize power, but they don't give it to him. They don't use their powers to make this happen. It's Macbeth that takes things to the extremes. Wound up is a verb phrase, and it reminds us of a children's toy, a spinning top, which would have been a toy that Jacobeans would be well aware of. There's a cord of string wound around it, and then that's pulled away to let it spin on its own. And that reinforces, because this is a child's toy, the witch's childlike enjoyment of these malicious acts. It also might suggest a clock. A clock is needed to be wound up to operate it. The clock then counts down. So it suggests that the witches are doing the winding up and then watching the clock wind down, like almost puppeteers of fate. Whilst they wind up the spell, they then let it go. They don't take any action after that. Macbeth is metaphorically wound up by the prophecies, and then he's released. Despite the fact that the witches are then complicit in what happens, after this, the course he takes is his own, just like a toy that's been wound up moves on its own. Now, spinning tops and clocks eventually run out of energy, they stop, they fall over. And this might foreshadow then Macbeth's tragedy and the downfall of his character. It really raises the question of responsibility. Shakespeare wants to invite us to question who's responsible. Macbeth has been described before this scene as a violent man, and the witches don't ever suggest Duncan has to die. So we need to be really aware that Macbeth absolutely has the potential to follow the same fate even without the witch's intervention. So, is Macbeth responsible? I think Shakespeare wants us to really think about that. And I think it's very clear to me, at least, that the witches, certainly whilst they are complicit, Macbeth is the one that ultimately has control over his fate. Here on the right, we've got a picture of a charm, and we've also got a picture of a spinning top, so you've just got those for reference. Now, from an AO3 point of view, our context is King James, who wrote demonology, and he used that to outline many of the conventions of witchcraft. And so Shakespeare uses these, possibly to appeal to King James. It could be argued then that even the inclusion of the witches is sycophantic. He's trying to appeal to the king. But there's also the possibility that he's trying to mock these ideas. James considered himself an intellectual, and so to believe heavily in witches could be quite foolish. And so Shakespeare, by including them, could also be poking a bit of fun. This is a really important quote. It's really deep. There's lots of clever things we can say about it, and it links to many of the themes of the play. We've got good and evil, we've got deception, we've got honour and kingship, even masculinity if you think that it is Macbeth that asks for this to happen. Stars, hide your fires, let not light see my black and deep desires. So the first part of this quote is stars, which are associated with heaven. Macbeth wants to hide his actions from God and the heavens because he knows that regicide is the ultimate sin, that doing this in the sight of God means he will go to hell. The other thing that is important here is stars are seen as guiding forces. We know this because there's a great example in the Bible of the wise men following a star that guides them to Jesus. Macbeth wants that to be gone though. He wants those fires hidden. The path that's being laid out for him by heaven, he now rejects. He rejects God, he rejects that path. He wants that hidden. We then see the imperative verb hide. He's calling for darkness to assist him. He wants the stars to hide their fires so that he can hide his thoughts and actions from others. He tries to command nature, which is something only God was believed to be able to do. Even though the witches have kind of limited power over nature, he wants the stars, the heavens themselves, to bend to his will. And this shows that this is a man who desires power, who believes the world should bend to his will. This is hubris, this is arrogance, and this is what leads to his downfall. It also shows a desire for power which breaks the chain of being. He believes that he can deviate from God's design, even command God's light, and that action will obviously have big repercussions for everybody in the Great Chain and for all of Scotland. So we've got Manichaean imagery in this quote as well. So light and stars shows us that he associates the light with goodness, with honesty, with virtue, with God, and he doesn't want light therefore to see his deed. He shuns the light because he allies himself with the darkness, which we know in Manichaean imagery relates to evil. He is reliant on the good forces ignoring or not seeing what he's doing to allow him to do the evil he needs to do. The adjective black is used to show that Macbeth fully understands that these thoughts are evil. When he says black and deep desires, he's talking about black-hearted, evil desires. So the absence of light, so it's closely linked to the idea of Manichaean imagery, the absence of goodness and therefore evil. He's allied with evil and he knows that God won't help him. This ambition is also the thing that causes the internal conflict that he starts to feel as he moves through the play. We've got the juxtaposition here of light and dark, and Macbeth at one point decides he can't kill Duncan and then is persuaded that he needs to. So there is a conflict inside him, and then after he carries out the act, he feels immense guilt. And so light and dark are constantly playing for his soul almost. Now this is said as an aside, so the stage direction tells us this is aside. So this is clearly an honest thought because no one's listening, no one's able to hear it but the audience. So these are not only secret, but they are honest. So we know that these are his true desires. The adjective deep shows that these desires are strong. He's aware of these desires. They're deep, almost bottomless. There's a possible connection to what Malcolm says later on in Act 4, and he makes a comment on kingship. He says, there is no bottom in my voluptuousness. And now what Malcolm's trying to say is that that would be a negative trait for a king, to have no end to his lust. Now, deep here possibly reminds us that Macbeth's desires are also bottomless, and so this is quite a damning criticism of these qualities in a king. The fact that they're deep shows that they're almost rooted into him. They're part of him. So again, we should question, was he ever the hero we thought he was? And we should really question whether this is about free will or not. I think it is, because they're a deep desire. That's not something that the witches gave to him. That was always there. Now, we don't talk about alliteration usually, certainly not on its own, but as a small point about a bigger quote, you could definitely mention the alliteration in deep desires. But alliteration does one thing, it emphasises tone, and here it emphasises the intensity of his ambition. This is a couplet as well, so the rhyme here established this as a complete, fully realised idea, not just some passing fancy, not just some whim that he has, he's long considered it. This is his final thought, fully formed, and it suggests his mind is settled on this. The noun desires shows us that this is something that he really, really wants, but he doesn't need it. So it goes outside of his sense of duty to his king. His ambition, his need for power overrule his guilt, his honour, and his loyalty at this point. This is an intense feeling he has. So again, we should definitely be linking this back to his hamartia, the fatal flaw he has, his dark ambition. This is also an example of linguistic mirroring, because Lady Macbeth, when she says "come thick night," mirrors a lot of this language. So when we see her say this later, it demonstrates their unity, their like-mindedness, their connection, their almost bond with each other. Now, this selection of quotes is about how Macbeth relates to Lady Macbeth. So it's a really great quote to talk about their relationship, or to talk about masculinity and femininity. It's a great one to talk about deception as well, because their strain on their relationship and the separation they feel throughout this could be a consequence of being deceptive. The other nice thing about this quote is that if you don't want to use it as one of your AO2 quotes, it can potentially be one of your AO1 quotes. Just remember, when you're using it as AO1, you do not talk about the techniques that you see. Instead, you talk about the ideas that this represents and what it means and what it reveals about the characters. So we start with dearest partner of greatness. We start with dearest, a superlative adjective. It shows Macbeth's love and devotion to his wife. She is his closest, most precious person. He trusts her above anybody else, and there's it feels like genuine affection here. And then when he calls her partner, this noun establishes that they are equals. They know each other really, really well. It subverts expectations of Jacobean marriages. It would be believed her job was the domestic sphere and he should be making decisions of more import. His job would be believed to control his wife, and to call her partner, he's actually failing at doing this. The audience might then blame him because she holds influence over him, and that's a male problem, interestingly, not a female problem. And this consolidates male anxieties at the time about what women might be like if they weren't adequately controlled. So there's an interesting comment on patriarchal ideas here, and like the negative influences of the way masculinity and femininity was portrayed in that time. They're also reliant on each other here as partners. They need each other to succeed. And it also reinforces that her power as a partner is tied to his inextricably. You can't untangle them. If she weren't married to Macbeth, she would have no power. She has no name in the play other than Macbeth's, and she's constrained by that and the roles of women in Jacobean society. So although she seems powerful, actually, by being his partner, by being Lady Macbeth and not her own person, she's actually limited by this. Greatness is a noun that reveals that this is an ambitious relationship. There's an ambitious nature to Macbeth. He sees his life with Lady Macbeth as one that's important, that's prominent. He could be referring to their current greatness. He's already a Thane. He's just received another title. So she could be sharing in that success. Or he could be talking about the great things they're going to do later. So the act of regicide he sees as great, but really it's not that he's seeing as great. He's seeing the idea that he'll be king later as the greatness. There's a sense in this quote they're going to share the rewards, but also possibly share in any consequences. Dear wife. So this is how Macbeth refers to Lady Macbeth in Act 3. There's been a clear shift from the superlative dearest to the adjective dear, and that reflects her reduced status. Possibly his decreasing sense of her importance, and the fact that he doesn't involve her in decisions anymore suggests that this might be true. As a wife, the noun wife defines her again by her relationship to her husband. And so this conforms much more to Jacobean expectations. Remember that a Jacobean would believe that a wife ought to be controlled by their husband and would almost be like property belonging to their husband. And so this suggests, by calling her wife, that he believes this now, that she's something that belongs to him, which is obviously a clear diminishment of their relationship. And this fits more closely with Jacobean expectations, wives that should be compliant and subordinate and recognise that she's less important, recognise her place. And it seems that this is what's happened. They've become more distant. Perhaps he feels now he's got power, now he's king. He doesn't need a partner anymore. Now, this is still a term of endearment. He does call her dear. There's still affection, but it is less so. And this perhaps foreshadows the diminishing relationship later. There's already a lot to say about this quote, so you might not want to think about this one, but it's just another point. He calls her Dearest Chuck as well, which is a very hollow remark. And this is a downgrade from Dearest Partner again. Dearest Chuck, Dearest Partner. Chuck, she's been zoomorphized into a vulnerable and small creature. It's still affectionate, but again, a diminishment of that partner of greatness. Later, Macbeth says, "How does your patient doctor?" So this is a rapid decline in their relationship. It's a really impersonal question and shows that close bond's gone. He could visit her, but he's chosen not to, and instead he asks about her from a third party, from her doctor. He also uses the passive pronoun your. She's no longer his, my wife. She's your patient. And it reveals that that close bond has vanished, and he views her as someone else's issue, someone else's problem. He's completely detached himself from her and relinquished his responsibility, and the only feeling he really has for her is through this professional, this doctor. He also calls her a patient. The noun patient here is quite neutral, but it also has no real affection. It's quite a term that doesn't really convey that sort of sense of closeness. She's also being defined by her physical condition, by her weakness rather than anything else. And this is important. Lady Macbeth is always defined by her position relative to other people. So she's a partner of greatness, but only great because she's married to Macbeth. Then she's a wife in relation to Macbeth, and now she's a patient as respects to her physical condition. He sees Macbeth as inferior, but possibly still sees himself with having a chance to succeed. Shakespeare, I don't think, could be clearer here, that if ambition and regicide become part of what you're doing, dire consequences are going to follow. This is the consequence of their actions. All of these quotes, again, deny Lady Macbeth her name. Her name, Lady Macbeth, suggests her power is only held in relation to her husband. So anybody who comments on her being powerful and dominant at the start, it could be argued she is, but really her only power and agency is because she's because she's wife to this man. And as he distances himself, she loses her power and her role becomes diminished. Come thick night and pull thee in the dunnest smoke of hell. Spoken by Lady Macbeth in the first act when she knows that Macbeth has had these prophecies made about him and she wants to help him succeed. A great quote because it relates to their relationship and what she wants for him, to the idea of what it means to be a woman in Jacobean times. It also relates to the supernatural and to deception and to the lengths people will go to be powerful. So the symbolism here of darkness is really important. She asks for her actions to be hidden from sight, very similar to what Macbeth asks for when he says, "Stars, hide your fires." Now, come is an imperative. It shows that she's trying to control the dark forces. There's some suggestion that there are echoes of the witches here. Now, this is transgressive behaviour for a Jacobean woman, so she would immediately be seen as other by the audience. Darkness is also a metaphor for evil here. It represents evil deeds and the dark thoughts that she and Macbeth have. There's an invitation here for darkness to hide them from view. She later asks for the heavens not to peep through the blanket of the dark. It suggests that Lady Macbeth knows that God will judge her for her plans, very similar to Macbeth. There's a motif, an ongoing set of imagery here around obfuscation and hiding. It suggests that she's not completely lost her sense of morality either. She has to ask for this. This is not a black and deep desire. She's asking for this to assist her because she knows she perhaps can't do it on her own, so perhaps foreshadowing the guilt she feels later. The means you, and it's quite an affectionate you, so she includes Macbeth here. She's asking for help, not just for herself, but for Macbeth as well. Now, she's linguistically mirroring Macbeth here. When he says stars hide your fires, she says something very similar here. The pattern of the words and what she asks for, they're very similar. The difference here, though, shows that Macbeth perhaps wants to hide his actions from God, whereas she's inviting hell up to hide hers. Perhaps she realizes that the inevitability of these actions will be to lead to hell. It also shows that they're kind of closely connected, that there's a bond between them as they speak in similar pattern. She asks for Dearest, a superlative. The darkest is what she means by this, and it consolidates that she understands that this is an enormous sin. Perhaps she needs it so dark that she can't even see her own actions, and we know she's obsessed by her sins later. Thick might be a reference to demonology, where it was written by King James that the devil could thicken the air to hide himself, and Lady Macbeth requires this same concealment. So she allies herself with dark forces here, particularly when she says hell. It reveals that she's not inherently evil. She needs hell to make the job easier. She understands she's going to hell for these actions as well. She's calling on the most evil force a Jacobean person could imagine. Look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent under it is one of our biggest quotes. There's so much depth to the quote, but also it links to pretty much any theme that I could think of coming up. You've got masculinity and femininity wrapped up here. You've got the idea of what it means and what it takes to be a king. We've got deception here. We've got free will. It's a really rich quote. So look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent under it is a simile and a metaphor. What Lady Macbeth's telling her husband is that he needs to look like one thing, but he's not actually that thing, but he really is going to be the other thing. So he needs to pretend he's a flower, but he's going to be a serpent. Look is an imperative verb. Yet again, she's in charge. Lady Macbeth is being dominant. She feels comfortable giving instructions. This subverts, yet again, the Jacobean expectations of women and of wives by directing her husband. Women are or were meant to be meek and mild in a Jacobean's eyes, and it was feared they could be truculent and they could be a problem if they weren't controlled. Innocent flower uses flower imagery, okay, and that suggests that if she wants him to look innocent and visually appealing like a flower, flowers are of no threat to others. She wants her husband to distract those around him by being likable and pleasing. A flower is also camouflage. It's a disguise, hiding his true nature. So again, a deceptive idea. Flowers also bloom. They bloom into beauty, but ultimately then they die and wither away. They're temporary. And this disguise will be temporary. You could also argue that Macbeth recently has bloomed. He's been given lots of titles and lots of respect from King Duncan, but that's going to wither away very quickly. Just like his reign when he becomes king. Possibly as a small point, some flowers have thorns, possibly a warning that we shouldn't trust everything that appears innocent. Flowers and innocence are connected to femininity. So flowers are often used as a euphemism for virginity, which is a highly gendered construct, a made-up thing that's applied to women and to girls, so it's considered to be feminine. And innocence is also something that Jacobeans would ascribe to women and girls. So between these two words, what she's saying is that he has to appear more feminine, because a Jacobean expectation of feminine people would be that they're less likely to do something wrong, they're less threatening, less likely to be feared. There's possibly a subtle suggestion of the milk that she talks about in the first act, where she is worried he's too full of the milk of human kindness. Again, a slightly feminine idea, but also I think unfounded. We don't really see any of Macbeth's feminine qualities in this play. I don't think they're really there to see. The preposition under it implies that evil may be underneath many of our behaviours, and to be underneath is to be hidden and to be deceptive, and that's what he needs to be. The second part of the quote is the metaphor then, be the serpent. Now this is zoomorphism. He's got to lose his humanity. He can't be a person anymore, he has to be a creature. Snakes are considered to be loathsome creatures. They've got a really bad reputation. They're considered to be sly, aggressive and predatory. He's going to have to be all these things, cunning and aggressive and predatory to do what he needs to do. They're considered to have sinister qualities, and many snakes are venomous. They crawl on their bellies, and this has also linked them to cowardice and deception. So Lady Macbeth recognises it's a cowardly act. He's going to need to embrace that, though, if he's to do what he needs to do. And the idea of him being venomous reminds us of the deception and the backstabbing nature of this. Now, snakes are cold-blooded creatures. Now, we use this phrase cold-blooded to mean emotionless in human beings, to have no remorse. She says that he has to be clear in his emotion. He has to have no emotion to carry out this regicide. And that turns out to be very true, because it is the guilt, the emotion she feels that undoes her, and the guilt he feels after the murder, immediately after the murder, that almost undoes their plan. A snake has two fangs, and that possibly represents the two daggers that Macbeth uses to kill Duncan, and that perhaps tells us that at that point he has become the snake. He's fulfilled that destiny. Snakes also slough their skin as they grow and as they change, so perhaps Macbeth is going to become something new in doing this. Lady Macbeth is also instructing her husband. He's got to be cunning, powerful, decisive. Snakes strike quickly and they're aggressive. He needs to seize the opportunity when he can to strike quickly and to be aggressive. The use of the definitive article the tells us that she knows which flower and which serpent. There's only one, and that is you. You are the flower, you are the serpent, possibly heightening his importance. The context for this quote is really important, particularly the idea about the Garden of Eden. So in the Garden of Eden, there was a serpent that tempted Eve to bring original sin into the world. Adam and Eve were ignorant, and they were told they weren't allowed to eat the forbidden fruit. A serpent appears that's commonly believed to be the devil and convinces Eve to eat it, and then she gives it to Adam. So there's a common thread in this story, that is that it's believed Eve, the first woman, caused the downfall of humankind and of men. So there could be a fairly misogynistic idea here about a woman causing the downfall of man. Is Lady Macbeth Eve here causing the downfall of man? But the other way of looking at it is that she tells him he needs to be the serpent. So potentially she's saying that he needs to be the evil in the world and bring evil into the world. He's actually the one that's going to bring darkness. Now, the snake was punished by being given no legs, and it would live on its belly eating dust. So a snake is a reminder of the downfall of humankind and the effects of sin. We're reminded with the snake idea that there are consequences to Macbeth's actions. There's also the gunpowder plot. After the gunpowder plot, an attempt on King James's life, a coin was issued with flowers and a serpent. And so this is a really clear allusion to that idea, particularly when Shakespeare has Lady Macbeth say under it, because the plotters were under the House of Lords, plotting to kill the king. So people who are betrayers, people who try to commit regicide, have to hide and be deceptive and live under the ground, not like normal people. Will all great Neptune's ocean wash this blood from my hand? No. So this is spoken after Macbeth kills Duncan, and this is about his guilt. This is about the consequences of his action. This is about violence. When he asks the question, will, and then answers with no, it's both a question, but it's also something we call hyperphora, which is very much like a rhetorical question, but we answer it straight away. He questions fate, he questions the consequences of his actions, but he also knows the answer to it. He's completely stricken with guilt. He seeks some sort of absolution, some forgiveness. The murder wasn't as easy as he had been led to believe. Now, answering the question, reveals to him that he knows forgiveness is not on the cards, and he knows not even the oceans can cleanse this sin. Compare that with his earlier smoked with bloody execution, the idea that he revelled in violence then, but now this bit of blood is causing him problems. We're going to see that spilling blood for ignoble causes has dire consequence. Spilling blood at the start for a noble cause is good, but for this case, it's an evil. Now he utters great Neptune, the Roman deity of the sea. Now Poseidon was his Greek counterpart, and in Greek mythology, Poseidon was one of the three great rulers of the gods. However, Neptune in Roman mythology was a slightly lesser deity. His powers were kind of conflated, mixed up with Poseidon. As such, Macbeth is appealing to a lesser god for forgiveness. Not a Christian God, because his connection with God has been severed. Remember that he cannot speak amen. God has rejected him, and he's rejected God, and so he cannot get forgiveness, so he needs to ask a different God for forgiveness. However, as God of the sea, Neptune should have complete, absolute power over the ocean. Not even that much power can absolve him of the guilt that he feels. This is incredibly hyperbolic. He's saying all the water on the planet Earth couldn't wash away the guilt of this crime, the blood on his hands being a metaphor for that guilt. And this emphasizes how enormous his crime is. We see three symbols in this quote: water, blood, hands. Water is a symbol often of purity and new beginnings. We have baptisms, and certainly in Christianity, which cleanse sin and allow you to be reborn. Lady Macbeth says a little water clears us of this deed, suggesting only a small amount of water is plenty to clear them of the crime. But Macbeth realizes that actually there's a greater magnitude here. He thinks that the entirety of the oceans would turn red, incarnadine, if he were to wash his hands in them. He also describes Duncan to his sons as the fountain of your blood, mixing blood and water together. And so he speaks about blood here, mixing blood and water, and then when he talks to about blood and water to Duncan's sons, his guilt possibly is still playing on him, mixing these ideas. Now, blood is symbolic of guilt. It's about the spilling of blood. Spilling of blood, is a crime, particularly in a case of regicide. Duncan's blood is also described as golden. And that suggests ideas about ichor. Now, the Greeks believed that their gods had a golden fluid instead of blood called ichor in their veins. As the chosen of God, Shakespeare's drawing attention to the magnitude of the crime. Duncan has almost godlike blood in his veins. So the motif of blood here depicts violence, guilt, but also, if you think about the fountain of your blood, the idea of lineage, the idea of passing down your lineage to your children. We've got the motif of hands as well, a singular noun here, but a hand represents action, agency, your capacity to act in the world. This is a single hand though, not both hands. A single hand might suggest he realises it's his responsibility and his alone, not Lady Macbeth's or the witches. He recognises his own complicity in this act. It's a personal pronoun, my, that really reinforces this as his own actions. This all relates to the idea of being caught red-handed. Having blood on your hands means you are guilty of the crime. Now, Macbeth was warned about this, or he was concerned about it, in his dagger soliloquy. He talks about on thy blade and dudgeon gouts of blood. The dudgeon is the handle. So if you were to hold a handle of a dagger with blood in it, you'd get blood on your hands. So in the dagger soliloquy, he's concerned about guilt there and the blood on his hands, and this turns out to be true. Lady Macbeth later cannot wash out the imagined spot of blood from her hands, and despite repeated washing, it doesn't go. So guilt is not easily removed from our hands, and that mixes all three of the motifs together. The blood of the guilt is on her hands, and she's trying to wash it with water, and coming together in that final image is really powerful. We're reminded by Shakespeare of a consequence of such extreme actions. Contextually, we're also reminded of Pontius Pilate. So in the Bible, he was given the choice to free Jesus, but he didn't. He got himself a bowl of water, he washed his hands in it as a symbol that he had no more responsibility. The phrase, "I wash my hands of this," that we still use today, comes from this story. But he was still culpable. He was still responsible. You can't wash your hands and then suddenly not have responsibility. Some accounts afterwards suggest that he died by suicide afterwards, although that's not entirely certain. But he definitely ended up in hell. And so it's a powerful idea that when you try to absolve yourself of sins, nothing can escape, nothing can allow you to escape your actions.